Welcome to TRC's webinar series. And thanks so much for joining us. This afternoon, we thought we'd address a key topic around interviews. So we wish to tackle quite a simple question, but not an easy one to answer. The question at the end of an interview, most people would get any questions. So joining me today, we have two presenters and both my colleagues with almost 40 years of recruitment experience between the two of them. We've got Simon Moss and Anna Maria Julie. So I'm going to give you a bit of a bio on both of them so you get a bit of insight into who they are and why you should take note of what they're saying, because they really know what they're talking about. So we've got Simon Moss, who is the recruitment company, our COO. He's been interviewing and recruiting high-performing teams for over 24 years now, more than 2 decades, both as a manager and as a recruiter. His backgrounds and expertise lie in sales, call center, and specialist IT, permanent and contract recruitment, having built many of his own high-performing sales teams with award-winning cultures. So I also have Anna Maria joining me, and Anna Maria, also my colleague, has worked within both internal and external recruitment for over 14 years now. Her background primarily within highly specialized technical niche markets, including software development and data analysis. Anna Maria has recruited for organizations across Europe and Australia, ranging from global blue chips to exciting brand new startups. And her insights encompass both permanent and contract recruitment as well. And her feedback that you're going to hear today is built from the managers and the candidates she's recruited for across her career. So I'm delighted to introduce both the two of them, and I'm going to hand you over now to Simon, who is going to tell you. Over to you, Simon.
Brilliant, thanks, Jeff. Just checking on my audio is okay there. Brilliant. Okay, hi everyone. Yeah, as Jeff mentioned, I've been interviewing for a lot of years, been recruiting for a lot of different companies over the time. And most interviews that you attend will end with a sort of deceptively simple question of any questions for us. And for many interviewees, this question comes at the end of the interview after a fairly sort of grueling hour of being grilled and testing your brain, and get to the end of the interview. And most people will answer, no, I think you've answered everything, largely because quite often most of your normal questions have been answered during the course of the interview. But this, I believe, is the wrong answer to give here, because although it isn't the intention of the interviewer for it to be so, this question is actually both a significant danger and an opportunity. So basically, it's a danger because if you don't have questions ready to ask, you can look badly prepared, you can look uninterested, and you can look uninsightful. Whether the interviewer consciously thinks that or not, that can be how you come across. It's an opportunity on the flip side, because one of the easiest ways to make someone think that you're interesting and clever is to ask them interesting and clever questions. It's a place in an interview where someone who may even be less qualified than other candidates for the role can really sort of stand out over other candidates by asking good, insightful, intelligent questions. It's also a place where a more qualified candidate who maybe feels that not all of their skills have been presented during the course of the interview, it's an opportunity for them to actually sort of crowbar in some answers to questions they wish they'd been asked. One of the biggest benefits of this question and being able to respond to it well is that we forget that interviewers aren't generally that experienced. They're not generally, they haven't necessarily had formal training in interviewing. That, we assume they know what they're doing, but quite often they're kind of winging it, shooting from the hip a little bit. So this is an opportunity for experienced interviewee to almost sort of make up for the fact the interviewer may not be as competent as they'd like. So you get to present your skills, your experience that maybe they missed, maybe they didn't ask you the right questions. it's a fact of life that people like talking about themselves and like talking about things they're passionate about. So if you get someone talking, or in the flow of talking about something they love, something they're passionate about, something they're proud of, they're going to enjoy that conversation. It's just human nature. And when they're looking back on that conversation, they're going to associate that sense of enjoyment, of engagement, of feeling challenged with you, even though all you did was ask them the question and they're responding to you. So having good questions ready to go when they ask any questions for us, it is a really powerful tool. In addition to that sort of sense of creating a more engaging interview, I've got to remember that a lot of jobs, a lot of roles out there actually require us to be good at asking good questions. So there's obvious ones like being a business analyst or being in sales. For me, if I'm interviewing a business analyst or a salesperson and I ask them if they have any questions, if they haven't got a good question, I would doubt personally whether they were a particularly strong business analyst or salesperson, because those roles require you to ask searching, probing questions, to build a story, to build a picture. So quite often, this is a really good opportunity to show rather than tell that you have good skills in these areas. This part of the interview is also important because interviewing is a two-way street. You'll be told this a lot, and it's something you tell people to motivate them, to boost confidence. I mean, it's true that although the company is interviewing you to a certain extent are interviewing them as well, and it's something we do forget. And on two different levels this works. Firstly, you want to know that this is the right company for you, that's the right manager you want to work for, the right role, the right opportunity, and it's a culture that you're going to fit into. So asking questions can actually help you ascertain that is the case. On a second level, things have shifted over the last 6 months in particular in terms of the number of candidates on the market. That's obviously increased, competition has increased for roles. So it is harder to get work now than it was 6 months ago. And being a candidate who asks good questions, who asks good probing questions, as well as allowing you to actually ascertain the culture of that company, check it's right for you, it also makes the manager think that you're the sort of person who chooses more carefully. You are the sort of person who picks opportunities carefully, who has different options open to them, is a person who values their own professional worth. And even if you are the sort of person, or you are in a situation where you need to take the first thing that falls into your lap, which unfortunately some of us are at the moment, it's a very different world to how it was 6 months ago. Even if that is the case, asking good questions presents the fact that you do have options. You're not going to take the first thing. Nobody wants to hire someone who's going to leave them in 3 months. No one wants to hire someone that's going to join and in 6 months take the first role that offers them a slightly higher salary. So asking questions, qualifying questions, really qualifying the role in the company shows that hiring manager that you're the sort of person that does pick a company based on match, that once you take a role, you're going to stick it out. You're not going to leave for a couple of extra $1,000. What questions did they ask is a question that interviewers ask. So, for instance, when Jeff interviews a recruiter to work at TRC, and we sit down to discuss that recruiter, and Jeff's telling you that the first question I'll ask Jeff is, I'll say, what questions did they ask? And without knowing anything else about that candidate, their skills, their personality, that's a question I love to ask. And if Jeff says to me, oh, they didn't ask any questions, I'm immediately disappointed. They've then got to be really good to get back on the front foot. If Jeff says, oh, they asked me this, they asked me that, I felt really challenged by this, they had a really good point about our website, immediately they're on the front foot. Regardless of the experience, I'm immediately thinking, oh, this person's researched us, they care, they're a proactive person. So when interviewers get together to discuss a candidate, that is something about you they will discuss, is the quality of questions that you asked in the process. Okay, there's some do's and don'ts when putting the questions together. Obviously, you know, it's a part of the interview you want to be careful with. I'll start with the don'ts. When they say to you, do you have any questions for us? Some definite things to avoid. So firstly, don't try and catch them out. You're not a lawyer. Well, you might be a lawyer actually, but you're assuming that you're not trying to be a lawyer here. You're not trying to cross-examine them. You know, there's a difference, and probably usually a fine line difference between being challenging and being insulting. So, for instance, if you were to ask an interviewer, you know, I looked on your Glassdoor reviews and you've got really poor reviews last year. Why is that? Is quite confrontational, very insulting. Asking them, you had really low or quite low Glassdoor reviews last year, but I've noticed this year they've increased significantly. That's really impressive. How did you go about that? It's challenging. It shows research. It shows an interest in what they do. So there's a fine line. You want to make sure you're not cross-examining them, trying to catch them out, being too aggressive. When they say any questions for us, don't say, I think you've all answered them all already, thanks. If they genuinely have answered them all already, either you've had a really long interview or you didn't prepare enough for it. Don't ask about money or hours. I always find this is this is not the point to ask those questions. They're important questions. They're important things to know about the company, about the role. This is not the time to ask those questions. If the first question you ask is about money and salary, it's an immediate red flag, but that's your motivation. That's what you want. Probably in the top 3 or 4 rules of recruitment is when you ask a candidate what their motivation for leaving a role is, if they say more money, we're taught to walk away. That is not a motivation for us to engage with a candidate. If that is, it's always a motivation. If that's your main motivation, it's a red flag. And likewise, if your first question is about hours and holidays, you come across as a bit of a clock watcher. So to avoid those questions, maybe ask them on a follow-up phone call, or when they're talking about putting an offer to you later on. And don't try and be too clever, or suck up too much. Basically, nobody likes a suck up. So going into too much detail, showcasing the fact that you've over researched them. It's great to do really thorough research, but you've got to have context. It's got to be the right level of research. So dropping in that you know what their share price was 2.5 years ago is probably a bit over the top. And likewise, being a bit of a suck up and talking about how amazing they were in this interview they did here, or can be a little bit over, a bit too much as well. So you want to find that right balance between complimentary, thorough, but also not being too clever with it. On the flip side, there's certain things that you should definitely do. If someone was to ask me, the one bit of advice that I would give an interviewee, someone going for an interview, from my 24 years of interviewing people and arranging interviews for thousands of candidates, it would be, before your interview, prepare a well thought out list of 10 to 20 questions, possibly more, but not too many more, that you can ask at this point in the interview. That would be the single bit. If I had to give one bit of advice, that would be it. We get feedback from people quite often. They're embarrassed to get out a notebook. They're in the interview, they don't have a notebook and pen in front of them. They feel that it shows that they can't think on the fly, that they need notes to support them. I'm incredibly disappointed every time I sit down with a candidate that doesn't get a notebook and pen out of their bag to talk to me. And the reason being is sitting there with a candidate that clearly has a list of points written in front of them, shows to me they've prepared, shows they care, shows that they've researched, shows that they've engaged with this role. And I would much rather that than someone that just sits back with nothing in front of them. Candidates that take notes during the course of the conversation is even better. I mean, writing out, verbatim what I'm saying is a bit unnerving, but key points or interesting points, taking bullet points in the notebook is awesome. So preparing a list of questions looks good, and sitting in the interview with that list in front of you is a great way of showing you've researched. I think you have to make sure that you are genuine in your curiosity. If you're genuinely not, if your curiosity isn't genuine for the role, then you've probably got to question whether it's the right role for you. But there are, if you're looking through a website, looking through a profile, and you feel like a genuine interest in something, ask the question. Those are the questions you should be asking, because that genuineness comes across, and people like genuine. You do need to respect their time. So if you've got an hour allotted to you, and it's 10 to the end of that interview, then and they say, any questions? I would always say, I do actually have quite a few questions. Actually, I'd love to go through. I'm conscious of time. How much time do you have? And the manager says, I've got 10 minutes. Make sure you tailor which questions you ask to that time frame. At the end of that 10 minutes, you say, look, I do have more questions, but I am conscious of time, so look, you've answered all the ones I wanted to ask. And the managers may say, oh, look, if you've got more questions, let's go through them. You may get them extended time, but at least you're showing that you respect their time, and you're respectful of the other stuff they have to do. And do engage with them and take notes. So it isn't a static process. You're not having a conversation where you ask a question, they answer, you ask another question. Engage with their response. If you're saying to them, oh, I noticed that one of your company values is teamwork. Can you tell me what you do? How do you live that value? And they say, oh, we go out every Friday. Follow-up question. Oh, can you give me some examples of places you've been or some things you've done? That sounds really interesting. Actually turning that question into a conversation to engage with them and take notes, because they come in handy later on. So there's some definite do's there. In most things in life, interviews, and particularly this part of the interview, are massively improved with the 3 Ps, which is preparation, preparation, and preparation. So basically, this is particularly true of this question here. So the 3 main areas where you can prepare for this specific part of the interview is through research, is through using your agency, if you have an agency, and is then actually during the interview itself. So I'll go through this. So, yes, in terms of research, research is the cornerstone of formulating good questions. So you want to find a fine balance between appearing smart and informed and looking smug and over the top, or like a stalker. So researching the person interviewing you, and saying, I noticed that you're part of a cybersecurity user group. That's really interesting. So am I, is great. Telling them where their kids hang out at the weekend, that's creepy. So tailoring your research and keeping it relevant is important. Places to research would obviously be LinkedIn. There's no excuse not to thoroughly read an interviewer's LinkedIn profile before you go and see them. I'm always surprised when candidates don't do that. And then the company's LinkedIn as well. The company's LinkedIn page has loads of useful information, job descriptions, and how you can see who else works there. You can research the types of people that they employ, people that have left, people that have joined, particularly within a team you're going to join. Get a real feel for the team and the culture and type of people that are there. The company website is a wealth of information. Again, you'd be surprised how many people don't do that. But reading the company news page, what are the big events that have happened to them? Read the company work for us page. What do they say their values are? What do they say their mission statement is? What are their goals as an organization? What do they tell you about working for them? Read that. If that triggers interest, pointing out right questions down based on that. Reading their blog page, mean, you don't want to ask too many questions about their blog page because it can look a little bit too try hard. But I think that if you can bring it up in conversation, that you've they mentioned something about web UX on websites, and you mentioned, oh yeah, I read an interesting blog on your website about UX on websites. Then, great, drop it into conversations. It's a great bit of research to have done. If you're Googling them, then you can get a wealth of information just from a simple Google search. News, articles about them, interviews with the CEO or key people, info about products they've purchased, big IT purchases, large projects they've undertaken, merger and acquisition, recent staff changes at the C-level staff changes. All these things will be on Google and news articles about them. If they're listed, having a look at their share price history is a great place to research. And then also look at their Glassdoor reviews. It's an awesome place to find out what sort of common themes are there in reviews from ex or current employees. What things consistently go across. I mean, you've got to be careful that you don't get too wrapped up in the negativity on Glassdoor, because obviously it's usually people who have left. But are there common themes? Do they micromanage? Are they a company where people feel valued but overworked? And get a real feel for that and formulate good questions from that. You can Google reviews or other relevant review sites based on what they do as a business. What do their customers say about them? What are the common themes? Let's say saying to a manager, I've read your Google reviews, they're awesome. You've got probably twice as many as your competitors, and almost every review mentions the word service. What is it about your people that make your customers feel so well looked after? It's an awesome question, and a great way of building rapport with the manager. The second way of preparing is to use your agency. If you go through an agency, an agency should be preparing you for your interview, and if they're not, you fully within your rights to be asking them questions and getting as much information from your agent as you can. So the information they can give you is, what's the interviewer like? What approach do they prefer? What's their personality like? Are they a direct, succinct person who doesn't like fluff? Or are they a chatty, verbose person who prefers roundabout, meandering questions? Getting those two wrong can really screw up an interview. Getting them right can make a massive difference, and your recruiter should be able to help you with that. The recruiter can give you information about projects, technologies they use, interesting things that happen in the business, great initiatives they've done. And the recruiter can be sharing all that with you, so you can be formulating questions around that. And then the beauty of using an agency as well is that they can do more of those admin type questions. So stuff around salary, hours, holidays, dress code, etc. So questions that you don't need to ask in the interview. The sort of housekeeping questions, the recruiter can take those for you, so you can focus on the more sort of meaty questions. And the third place to prepare is actually during the interview. So you can prepare for this question because you pretty much guarantee they're going to ask this at the end. So through the interview, you can prepare for this. If the client is chatting, they mention something that's interesting, you've got your notebook in front of you, note it down. It's a really powerful thing later on when they say, any questions for us, to come back and say, oh, look, thanks for asking. Earlier on, you mentioned that your team had doubled over the last 12 months. How's that impacted culture? How have you retained the great culture that you clearly have got at the moment? It's a great question. It refers back to something they said earlier on. It shows that you're listening. It shows that you're engaging. It shows that you care. And for an interviewer, having an interviewee who is engaged and cares and is intelligent is a really powerful boost that will get you ahead of other candidates, even if they're more qualified for the role than you are. So that's my tips for how to prepare for an interview. I think that the awareness of that question is deceptively simple, and it can be a dangerous question, but if prepared for right, it can also be an amazing opportunity to really stand out. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Simon. That was fantastic.
No worries.
There were some Great tips in there. And as Simon just said at the end, it's a simple question. It's not easy, but there were some really simple implementable tips there from you, mate. So thanks so much for your insight. Now, I know that there are a number of questions. Barry's put one up already, and I'll just quickly address that we will answer all questions at the end as part of the Q&A when we all get together after I've introduced Anna Maria and she's taken you through her part. So I'm going to pass over to Anna Maria now. Anna Maria is going to take you through some case study examples of this interview question. So over to you, Anna Maria.
Thanks, Jeff. Good evening, everybody. So as Jeff mentioned, I'm going to talk through a case study. And prior to going into that, I'm actually just going to further define some of the different types of questions as well and the general categories that questions would tend to fall into. So two types of questions, a closed question, which would be, to give you an example of a closed question, something I'm passionate about, do you like chocolate? A yes or a no answer. I'm probably not going to allow you to gain that much information. A way to rephrase that could be, describe to me how much you like chocolate, which should obviously get a little bit more emotion, a bit more feeling, and really giving you a bit more of a description into the person's thought process. So they're the first two types of questions. In an interview scenario, and the question section at the end, questions tend to fall into three different categories. So firstly, your factual questions. So these are the questions that would really allow you to gain concrete information, whether it be about the job itself, roles and responsibilities, the company, or even the team you'll be working on, that allow you to get that concrete information to make your decision. Secondly, rapport building. So questions that will hopefully extract some information about shared interests, shared values with the interviewer, and generally just allowing you to build a bit more of a stronger emotional bond, maybe warm up the interviewer a little bit, and just gain more of a bond, more trust, and hopefully a stronger relationship and a good feeling at the end of the interview. And then lastly, selling questions. So these would be targeted questions, really thought out questions that would allow you to open up the dialogue to further sell, one of your specific skill sets that you may have a feeling could add value to the employer, but it's not been elaborated upon within the interview so far. So they would generally be the three types: factual, rapport building, and selling questions. So now I'm going to give you some examples of possible factual questions. So one question could be, in an interview scenario, what do you imagine the career path would be for somebody in this role? And then a team question could be, can you tell me a little bit more about the team I'd be working in? Is it small or large? And what are the people like that I'd be working with? And then thirdly, a leadership question. How would you describe your leadership style? And is there anything you'd like me to know about you as a leader? So there will be three different examples of factual questions. And then rapport building questions. One example could be, I've read some excellent reviews on Glassdoor about your company. In your opinion, what do you think makes people want to continue working for the company and also returning back to the company as well? I can see from LinkedIn you've really progressed up through the ranks, from a senior consultant to now being a partner. What do you enjoy most about working here? And I can see you won an award for innovation. Can you talk to me a bit more about how you did that? And lastly, what are some of the biggest opportunities that you feel are within the company at the moment? And what does this really mean for the staff? So they're all examples of rapport building questions. And then maybe some selling questions. Thinking about employees that you've had previously, what in your opinion sets the good apart from those who were really great? And then the most important part of this question is when the interviewer is relaying the answer, if you ensure that you note down what they're describing to be great. And then that way, when it gets to the end of the interview, you're in a good position to hopefully relay some of that with some of your expertise. Another example could be, I like to continually learn. I've recently done a certification in NLP. What types of professional development opportunities do you offer here? So they're all examples of the rapport building, the factual, and also the selling questions. So we thought it would be a good idea to do a bit of a case study, use some of the different types of questions and some of the tips that Simon's gone over and put it into a real life scenario, so that it would allow you to get a picture of how it could be used in the real world. So the scenario we've came up with is that of a web developer coming for an interview at the recruitment company. The reason we picked the recruitment company is because it's the closest point of reference to ourselves and also a company that we know really well as well. So the scenario being the web developer is going for a second stage interview, being represented by an agency, and now you're at second stage having your interview with Jeff Miller, who is the CEO. So the information and the context you've had from the recruiter is that there are two other candidates going for the interview, apparently more technical than yourself. So you've made an extra effort to do lots of preparation. You also asked the recruiter, did she have any context about Jeff Miller as a person, any tips that would be helpful? She said that Jeff was a really warm, really chatty guy. That was the approach that he likes. Also, not that technical. So, you know, any additional business areas that you could talk about, as well as the technical web details, would add value. As Simon mentioned, preparation is key for any interview scenario. So going into the interview as a web developer, researching a little bit more about the recruitment company and Jeff Miller, some of the approaches you could have taken to look at Jeff's LinkedIn profile. That would give you a lot of information around any groups that he's part of. You'd be able to see that he'd done an interview on Seek recently, which could be a good point to mention. Some of the things that he's interested in outside of work, posts about running, which is helpful to know, because then you can maybe talk about sport or if you enjoy running as well. Research on the company website, and from that you've gained a really good knowledge of some of the awards they've got. You saw that they've won 2 awards. They've got a big mantelpiece of awards. 2 of the most recent awards were from Seek for the most innovative agency, 2019, 2017. Some ABA awards as well. Definitely good to mention. And then, as with any company, there's also reviews on Glassdoor. So you've had the opportunity to hone in on that. You've noticed that from your research, a big theme that seems to be dominant in the Glassdoor reviews are the real family feel and the flexibility on offer from the company. But just that real family feel seems to really be coming through on some of the reviews. So that is something you may want to mention as well in the interview section. Okay, so now you're in the end of the interview with Mr. Jeff Miller, and Jeff, you're aware he's a busy guy. He's quite constrained from time to time. So firstly, you're going to go into your factual questions because these are going to allow you to gain real information. You are also considering a couple of other job opportunities. So this will get you good information to allow you to compare it. Let's get into it. Jeff, thinking about web developers that you've used previously, what do you think has set those apart from those that were good to those who were great? If I were to get the job, what would my first week look like? What would my first month look like? And how would you measure success? And then lastly, why is it that you've decided to bring on board a web developer right now? Now you've got the facts out of the way, you might want to warm Jeff up a little bit and gain a nice warm feeling and get a bit of rapport going. So Jeff, I can see from your company website, one of your values is recruitment renegades. What do you mean by that? And how do you and your staff live that value? I also see from your webpage and your LinkedIn that you've won so many awards. Which one are you most proud of? And going delving deeper into some of the Glassdoor reviews, I saw that over the last 2 years, the company's rate of churn has dropped significantly. That's really, really amazing. Could you tell me and expand a little bit more on how you made this possible? Hopefully Jeff's feeling happy now. Hopefully the good feeling's there. And now it's time to round off your questions and hopefully sell yourself a little bit more. I noticed from some of my research on LinkedIn and some other social sites that you've been getting lots of views and lots of likes on your social posts. I wanted to mention that alongside web development, I do have experience and a certification in SEO and developing online presence for companies. So I'm keen to understand a bit more about how you went about building your online presence. Also, from browsing some of your LinkedIn pages and also your Facebook pages, I can see you do a lot of really cool social events, gingerbread house making. I saw some collaborations with clients and quite a lot of fancy dress as well. When I was at my old web agency, I actually ran the social committee for the past 2 years. I loved it. And we did some really, really quirky events. So I'd love to know a little bit more about how much engagement you get from your clients and who all on doing these events and who in the company drives the initiatives as well. I did quite a lot of research. So when I was looking at LinkedIn, on your company page and both on your individual page, I saw that giving back to the community seems to be a really dominant theme for you guys. That's great for me because that aligns really well with my own values. For the past 2 years, I've been part of a large mentoring program in which I work with new immigrants that are keen to break into the technology sector. It's something I'm really passionate about doing. So the fact that you guys give it back to the community is really good. Could you give me any more examples of how the company gives back? Thank you. I love what I hear. Is there any other bits of information that I could maybe give you at this stage to help you with your decision? I am conscious that you've only not got much time, but I just wanted to mention, I noticed on LinkedIn that you're connected with Katie Holmes. Yeah, I actually know Katie really well. I studied with her at university. We studied web development together. We've maintained a friendship, and I've actually consulted for her fashion label, and I designed her current website as well. So hopefully if you did, speak to Katie about my expertise, hopefully she'd have good things to say. All right, I'm conscious for time. So are there any other questions you've got for me? Otherwise, thanks for listening and answering my questions, Jeff. Right, thanks, guys. I hope that case study was useful. Now we're going to conclude, and then everyone's going to have the opportunity to ask some questions as well. So, look, in conclusion, obviously Simon went through a lot of points about how to ask questions, do's and don'ts, and why it's such a powerful part of the interview. Preparation is so key. Doing your own research, using your agency, and importantly, but often forgotten, making notes throughout the interview on what the interviewer says, and just really having a range of questions, factual, building the rapport, building the warmth, and not forgetting to round off your interview with selling yourself as well. Okay, thanks everyone. Hopefully we can answer some of your own questions now.
Thank you, Anna Marie. That was awesome. Warm and chatty. I'd probably agree with that. I'll take it as a compliment. So Anna Marie gave some really strong examples there of some simple questions to ask, and just for everyone who's on the webinar, that we will be sending those out to you. What we'll probably do is put them on our website and send you the link, and also put it on into a podcast format. But what I'm going to do now is jump into some questions as we've got a few through the chat and through the Q&A function. And also, if anyone else wants to throw a question in, please just drop it onto the the chat function here or straight into Q&A. But the first question to throw to myself and the other two panelists, and Simon and Anna Maria, is from Louise Barry. Louise asks, when time is of the essence, how do you work out which is the most important question to ask? That's a really good question. And I suppose it depends when you get to ask this question, at the start or at the end. And hopefully by the end of the interview, so say you have a list of 20 questions as Simon suggested, then 15 of those questions may well have been answered. So you have that long list has now been truncated to a very short list, which should help you decipher which questions to ask, because you've got something less to ask. But then also, in my opinion, you could say to the manager, like, I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask. I'm just going to quickly check which one I think would be most appropriate right now, based on it being time, with us being time pressed. And silence is always powerful. You can sit there for a minute or 10, 15 seconds and just look through those questions. Say, I've got the question I want to ask, and file a question. That'd be my thoughts. How about yourself, Anna Maria and Simon? What would be your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I think they're sort of sitting back and almost making a show of, if they should have very limited time, any questions for me? So, okay, well, I've got a load of questions, but this to me is the most important one. I think around culture, I think asking them about the company culture, what makes it great, those sorts of questions. If you only got one question, those are really good ones, because they sell you because you've clearly researched. You know, the question, it says on your website that this is one of your values. Can you tell me how that materializes in your day-to-day operations? Shows you've researched, you're implying that you're aligned with that value because it's the one you picked to be interested in. It builds rapport because it allows them to talk about some of the awesome stuff that they've done in building a team where that value is so prominent. And you're also getting facts. You're also getting the fact gathering as well, because if they say, you know, we have teamwork because we catch up once a quarter, and you know, your idea of teamwork is catching up 3 times a day, then they're not aligned. You've got that fact in front of you, you can make a decision. So I think that those cultural questions cover a lot of bases.
Yeah, really good point, mate. Really good point. Anything else, Anna Maria, you'd add to that? Just a reminder, the question is, when time is of the essence, how do you work out which is the most important question to ask?
Yeah, I think in line with what Simon said, I think it's a culture question is a really powerful one. I think it'll give you a really good vibe for the organisation. I think you could probably load the question as well, particularly if it was a job that you really, really wanted to. So once they've given you, you know, their information about the culture and how they look to build that, if you were at that stage able to sell anything, you know, add anything that you'd done at previous companies around building that culture, around any innovative ideas that you'd contributed, I think that would make it really powerful and just round off that interview in a really positive way.
All right, brilliant. Thanks, Anna Maria. I have another question here from Julfia Marek, which is, can we ask questions like, what does success mean to you? Or can we also ask the interviewer, what is your leadership style? I'd say rather than me giving you an answer straight away, because I've crowded the other two, I'll throw it to you, Anna Maria, and go back in reverse.
Absolutely. I think they're both excellent questions. I think they're both, you know, would generate a really, really informative discussion. And I think that would, I think they're both factual and rapport building. So yeah, I think they're both really, really positive questions. I'd encourage you to ask those questions.
Have you, Simon?
Yeah, I love questions when I'm interviewing someone and they're asking me, what does success look like to me? What you know, what would make me successful in this role? You know, just to say that you're already thinking about success, you're thinking about performing, you think, you know, you're not thinking about holidays and when you get to go home at the end of the day. You're thinking about how to make this successful. That's powerful. It's a really powerful question. And it is a really good insight into how a manager thinks. I mean, if they're a person that, success to me is someone working 12 hours a day, okay, they're an input person. If success to them is hitting all your numbers, then they're more output kind of person. It gives you really good insight into that manager. I think the main thing, if you're talking about success, it does portray that you're thinking about that. And asking someone about their leadership style is a really good way of getting them to open up.
Yeah.
It can do quite bland answers to that. Most managers will say, I'm very hands off. Even the biggest micromanagers will tell you they're very hands off. What they mean is that they want to be hands off, but when they realize they don't trust someone, then they get stressed about it and micromanage them, and then they're annoyed because they can't be hands off. So I think you need to sort of follow on with additional questions when they say, I'm hands off. What do you mean by that? Or can you give me some examples? Because they don't take that sort of first answer as given.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, to be honest with you, those two questions are great asked together, because they would give you a real insight to that individual. And I also think that first question, what does success mean to you? I'd make the assumption that most people would ask that question in a very obvious results-driven environment, like a sales environment or like a course environment, when you're literally targeted on your number of calls or the number of sales you make. But then I think that's also a really important question to perhaps less results visible roles, some IT roles when you're developing lines of code. I think that that question still has very strong presence or relevance to that interview. So
I think with the question about leadership style as well, I think you're exactly right, Simon, about most people would say they're quite hands-off. I think a powerful question I've been asked is, alongside leadership style, what would the communication points during the week be with my manager or with my team? Because I think that will give you an insight as to how, whether you communicate daily, whether you communicate weekly, whether it be several times a day. And I think often that's quite useful information to have as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. There's another.
Just on the, so what is your leadership style? There's a trick that we use when interviewing candidates called, it's called the fork, which is fear of reference check. And it's basically saying, basically you send the same question, what do you like at work? And you say to kind of, if I asked your manager, what would they say about you? Is a slightly different question to what do you think your manager would say? So asking a manager, what is your leadership style? You'll probably get a fairly bland answer, but asking them, if I was to ask your team, when I meet the team and I ask them, what's your leadership style? What would they say? It's a bit of a trap because they don't want to lie. And it also allows them to be a bit more honest, because they would say, oh, look, I'm quite hands off, but Anna Maria would say that I probably spend, keep quite a close eye on what she does. And, so it allows them to maybe put in some of their weaknesses in a softer way, because they're doing it through the eyes of someone else. It's nice.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, great. So we have another question in here from Lisa. Obviously very COVID specific, but a really good question. Very, very relevant. It's given the economic climate, how do we approximately ask about job security? I think my answer on that would be, throughout the interview and probably from your agent, you would have got an insight into how the manager asks questions, whether they're quite succinct and to the point, or whether they're quite verbose in explanation. So I think, depending on what that person is, you're either very direct and say, look, I've got to ask during COVID, how secure is this job? Do you still see me here in a year's time? This is where I want to be, but do you see me here? Do you still see this role here? If they're perhaps more verbose, then you might ask the question a little bit less succinctly and say, look, obviously I'm on the market. I'm about to leave my current role because I haven't been happy there for a while, and it just happens to be COVID. It's not about COVID. It's about the role, and I'm not looking to to move or make the wrong move during such a strange time as COVID. Could you give me an insight into where you see this job going? What's the 2-year plan for this? What's a year plan for this? Rather than being really direct and is the job still going to be around in a year, you'd just stretch it out a little bit. But based on the point I think that Simon made about the manager being either very to the point or perhaps a bit more around the houses.
Yeah.
How about yourself, and Simon? What would you say to that question?
Yes, it's a tricky one because I think, again, researching their industry, because some industries are doing really well through COVID and others are really struggling. So researching articles maybe on that industry or from competitors. And I suppose either asking them direct. I think we're in a time where we're very justified in asking very direct questions. I don't think anyone is going to be overly shocked if you were to say how badly has COVID hit your business. It's a very valid question to ask. But also I think saying, I read an article about, industry XYZ, that some companies are doing well, some are not doing so well. If my research says you're doing well, what's your take on how your business is doing in this? How has it impacted you? I probably wouldn't ask specifics around, how many people got made redundant or some of those more negative things, because it can, it can be a real downer on a generally upbeat conversation. How many of your friends got fired over the last couple of months is never a cheerful topic. So more sort of how is the business going, more sort of roundabout, how's it impacted? And if they want to talk about redundancies or that sort of stuff, then they bring it up. That'll be my advice.
Thanks, man. And how about yourself, Anna? Anything you'd add to that question being?
It'd be similar. I think just still asking the question, because it's very, very important to know. I would probably, use positive language. How has the business had to change since COVID? How has the culture changed, and how do you see it changing further in the next 1 year, 2 year? But still using the word change, because I think that directs the answer. But just keeping the language positive.
Yeah, and I think, thanks, Henry. And I also think for a lot of businesses, it's such a unique and strange time for everybody that looking back in hindsight, and I know this from speaking to some customers, that the actions they took at the start of COVID were perhaps a little bit too overt, too strong. And then maybe some regret in some of the things they've done, and they might talk about that. But I think a question that you would ask to give yourself some insight into the security of it would be, how did the team survive? Like so trying to ask in a nice way, how many did you terminate people based on COVID? Were you a quick responder? Or were you patient? Did you wait and see what the market was doing before you took really drastic action and changed people's lives? So I suppose, like I said, back to it at the start, as you can see, I'm a verbose kind of person, but I would, based on the interview style of the interviewee, be direct or walk around the houses. So we have another question. Sorry, it's the same question there. I've got another question here that came in from Steve, which is, should you ask questions to each interviewer, specifically first interview, second interview, third interview? Which is a really good question, because you often in an interview process, you have more than one interview. And my answer to that would be yes, absolutely. It wouldn't probably be the same question. It would probably be the same question to the manager about their interview style or their leadership style. But different questions about their business, and probably questions about things you found out during the interview. But absolutely, yes, I would ask questions in every stage of interview. How about yourself, Anna Maria?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I think you'd have a lot more, information as well from what they told you, to be able to ask more questions on the third interview. And I think, hopefully they would have given you, a bit of context around, what they were doing that week, what was happening in the business that month. So you'd be able to follow that up as well in your final interview, and it would show that show that you're engaged.
Yeah, sure. And Simon, how about yourself?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, because when I've got a client of mine, and they're in sort of top 10 fastest growing companies in Asia Pacific, and they've grown phenomenally well. They're just an awesome company. And it's purely based on culture and the people that they employ. And one of they have a first interview, which is a telephone interview where they go through the role. They have a second interview where the interviewer says, "Oh, so tell me what so-and-so told you about the role." And then they have a third interview and they say, "Oh, tell me what so-and-so told you about the role." And candidates come back to me and say, "Oh, I don't know what they're doing over there. Keep asking me what to summarize they don't communicate." And I keep saying, what they're doing is they know exactly. I mean, they interview 20 people a week for this role. They're constantly growing. They know exactly what they're word for word what the other person said. They want to know that you know what that person asked. So I think if you've got sequential interviewers, being able to say, I spoke to Jeff last week, and he said that your company strategy around this was X. What's your take on that? You're asking the question, you're confirming information, but you're also showing them that you remember, that you listened to, that you took on board the feedback and the information you got in the last interview. And you kind of, because sometimes you speak to candidates and they don't know, they can't remember what we talked about before, they don't seem that engaged with it, but that shows engagement, it shows understanding, it shows a real sort of commitment to the process. I think asking the same general question if they compare notes, can be a little bit insulting. Well, I told them that. Why did they? If you ask the same person how many people in the company, to every person, so I told him we've got 25 people. Don't they believe me? But asking Jeff, what's your leadership style? Then asking Anna Maria, okay, I've interviewed with Jeff last week. What would you say his interview style is? That's a good question to follow up with as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I think it's a great question. So I've got another question here from Daniel. How do you think a big break from work over the pandemic period is being perceived by employers? I think that there would be so many employers right now, Daniel, that would be probably facing that themselves as well, that everyone is very accepting of it. I don't believe the pandemic is, I'd imagine, I'd put it down as a blip on someone's CV, not something that you just bypass. To me, it wouldn't be a concern. People have lost roles through no fault of their own whatsoever, purely down to company instability, poor management of COVID in its first few months. There's so many reasons, and that is the common. I think we're going to find it so common over the next 6 months, 18 months, 3 years. I wouldn't even, if it's something you have in the back of your mind, I'd try and eradicate that, because you're going to be the same as so many other people having that same concern themselves. Maybe even ask the employer to say, like, do you see the fact that I was not working through COVID as a problem or as a concern? Can I tell you a bit more insight? Can I give you insight into how that came about, what the company's actions were, and why myself plus everyone else in the company lost their role? So I'd probably address it head on again, but I don't believe anybody would be. I really love to think.
This is one of my, even before COVID, personally, I've got a real thing about that. There's this sort of perception that gaps on CVs are perceived as bad. And some employers would see a big gap in CV as bad. And I would probably say those employers are, not particularly pleasant people to work for. I mean, everyone has gaps in their CV. I mean, if someone is off raising children for a few years and then comes back, I always think people need to just own gaps in CVs. Just say on a CV, between this date and this date, raising children, this date and this date, took some time out to look after a sick relative, whatever it is, own it, put it in there. If there's
I think that's the key, the owning it and the confidence and, seeing it as, it's a circumstance that's happened, but not.
Yeah, and I think
you don't want any resentment to come through.
Then when people are out of work, that sense of, oh my God, this gap's getting bigger and bigger. If I don't find work soon, it's going to look worse and worse. It adds to the stress of
the panic.
Looking for work. Looking for work is really stressful. It's really depressing. It's mentally very draining. And I think even in normal circumstances, an increasing career gap can be really stressful. And I think I don't think it should be as stressful as it is. With COVID, it shouldn't even be a consideration as a point of stress. I mean, looking for work in the current environment is bad enough as it is. If you have an employer that looks negatively at you because you had a gap in your CV due to COVID, that employer is an arsehole. You do not want to work for them, full stop. Like it shouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't let that point stress you too much.
Yeah, I don't think any good employer would correlate that as anything to do with performance whatsoever.
Yeah.
I think so many thousands of people are in the same situation. So yeah, like Simon said, own it. Just own it, and just still don't let that detract from all your strengths and everything you've built up over the years.
Superb. Well, we've hit on the nose at 6 o'clock, and we've answered all of our participant questions. Yeah. But I just want to say a huge thank you, firstly, to everyone that's been a part of this and listened to what we've had to say. And I really hope you've been able to take something out of it. I've got a couple of comments here from guys that had to step off early. So thank you ever so much for the feedback so far. And then a massive thank you to Anna Maria for your input there, your case studies and your questions. And to you, Simon, for your insight into the importance of that question and not undervaluing that. That's a simple but not easy question to ask. So thanks so much, guys.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll send you out all the information on our email, a link to the webinar.
Yep, and that will be out with you as soon as we can get it out, more than likely tomorrow. So stay tuned for that one, and listen out for our podcast too. That'll be out on podcast. This will all be out on podcast very soon. Cheers, guys.
Brilliant.
Happy Thursday. Catch you later.